topic is looking back to plan ahead. The issues and opportunities. We've all faced some issues, but to me, it's like golf. It's like anything. When you're hit behind a tree, which I do often, how do you look at that? You look at that as an opportunity to make a great play. So what have we learned from this past year, and what can we take advantage of in 2022? I took a couple of topics: working remotely. How do you create a good culture remotely? I know we've talked about that, I think in August or September. David Van Daff had some great ideas on that. And I know Danny Dolan had some questions about how to improve your culture when you're working remotely. What are some new tools or technology available to increase engagement? What leading indicators do you use now to drive revenue? What are your KPIs? How do you monitor production remotely? So
No, it's too hot. Oh, I have this.
Yes, if we could mute, please. I appreciate that. To control that a little bit better myself. All right, Brian Moran, you're my sidekick. You can always coach me on how to mute the group when needed. So anyway, I want to open it up. What have you learned in 2021 that can carry over to 2022? For me, I think you can create a culture remotely. I think we don't assume. I think we all prejudge. We make quick decisions. We think people don't want to come into the office because they're lazy. But if you ask them, you might get another reason. One of my members in Vistage was having an issue with people working remotely. And he finally asked them, why won't you come back into the office? And they say, well, the commute's too far. The cost of living in the Charlotte community is expensive. So now they have to commute an hour and a half to get to work. So they'd rather work remotely. So I think that we can't assume. The other thing that I've had to learn personally is to say no. How do you say no? And I have Stephanie on the call here. Stephanie, I just asked to work with me as an executive assistant, so she can handle a lot of the day-to-day things that bog me down, so I can hopefully do the things that I love to do, and that's coach and teach leadership. So anybody, what have you learned in 2022, 2021 that you see as an opportunity to take advantage of in 2022? Brian, go ahead. I see you with your hand up.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing I learned, not so much an opportunity, but just kind of a lesson, I guess, is that
just a talking group or something. You can join if you want.
Hold on, Greg. I need you to mute.
Yeah, I got the other Long Island. We got another Long Islander talking in the background.
Those chatty Long Islanders.
Chatty Long Island. Brian, if you don't mind, introduce yourself and what's your background, what you do in 10 seconds so people can get an understanding of
Sure.
who you are.
I grew up on Long Island. I live in northern New Jersey now. I spent a little over 20 years publishing magazines and newspapers. So I was at the Wall Street Journal, Inc., entrepreneur. I had my own publishing company. And now I have two companies. And what we do is we help large companies reach the small to mid-sized business market, and we help entrepreneurs run better companies, and we do it globally. And so what I've learned in 2021 is I get to work with a lot of really smart, talented people, successful people, and even the smartest, most successful people are still learning to pivot. We keep saying, like, when are things going to get back to normal? And the smart companies, the savvy companies realize this is the new normal. Whatever we're going through right now, this is it. This is like an evolution. We're not going to go back to, working in the office 5 days a week and no more Zoom calls and no more working remotely. And the sooner we realize that as leaders and business owners, the better. And so, but what the smart companies are doing for 2022 is they're creating what I call a GPS plan. And they're saying, okay, here's where we want to be at the end of 2022, December 31st, revenue goal or acquisitions or, how many employees we're going to have in the company. And they'll set these specific goals and then they'll give themselves, normally it would be, okay, here are 3 paths to get there. Now I'm seeing more like 6, 7, 8 paths to get there because they play the what if game. They go, okay, well, what if this happens? Or what if that happens? How will we respond? And so I'm seeing a lot more of that as a result of what we've gone through in 2021. Because who thought we'd still be talking about the pandemic almost 2 years later, or remote working, right? I don't know. I didn't have that on my bingo card, so I'm out as far as that's concerned. So the lesson, I guess the ultimate lesson learned is have as many options as you can and be prepared to execute on those options. So I call it the what if game. So if you're not playing the what if game now, then what happens is when you come to that fork in the road, either you got to make a snap decision. Okay, do I go left? Do I go right? Or you choose a direction. And then the next thing you know, you're backing up because you go, shit, I made the wrong decision. We shouldn't have bought that company. We shouldn't have opened that new location. We shouldn't have taken that outside money for our business. We shouldn't have shut down that product line. Whatever the decision is, the more knowledge you have in advance, the better off you are when you do hit that fork in the road.
Yep.
That's the lesson that I've learned.
Brian, I think that's great input. I think a couple things come to mind as you talk. What if Kevin Eastman, who coached in the NBA, who some of these guys know, talks about you have to have a what if guy on your staff. What if it rains? What if it snows? What if the technology, the system crashes? What if there's a pandemic? Now, that wasn't on, as you said, on anybody's radar, but what if? And I think if we're not asking what if, and we just assume that everything can just, it's not going to happen, well, then that's bad leadership. And I think that you have to have those conversations. That's I think a great point. And then embracing the new. You don't have to like it, but you better embrace it, because if you don't embrace it, you're going to get your butt kicked. I want to recognize a couple other people. Marissa Canfield from Higher Better in Austin. Thank you, Marissa. It's great to have you on. And then
thanks for having me, Matt.
one of my favorite players, although I hate to admit it, just came on, Mike Palmer from St. Agnes High School and Iona College. Mike, I love to hate you when you played at St. Agnes. You were one of my favorite players, but I just couldn't admit it to you. And here I did it on the webcast. So thanks for joining us, Mike.
And doesn't he
Thanks,
have
Matt.
a twin sister named Lisa?
Do what?
Yeah, Lisa Palmer. She's we're meeting tonight. I'm in New York. I'm going to the Jimmy B Classic
Nice.
in the Garden. I'm staying at my the New York Athletic Club in my dormitory room here, and I had some bad Wi-Fi, but I just figured it out. So
Good. Thanks, Mike.
you were one of my favorite players too, Matt. Thanks a lot for
all right.
recognizing me.
Hey,
Thank you.
Matt.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
only was Mike a great player at St. Agnes, Wake Forest, and Iona, but his dad was an unbelievable athlete. My father used to play softball, senior softball against him, but I know his dad went to Post, and he was a very, very good ball player.
Well, thanks for sharing. We're dominated by Long Island. Dickey, you've got your hand up. Dickey Simpkins, is one of my favorite people. Dickey played at Providence from Washington, D.C., is in the front office with the Washington Wizards, does TV, does corporate talks, has a daughter at Harvard, a daughter at Brown. Talk to us, Dickey. Give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Matt's got me up early this morning. Luckily, I already get up early to take the kids to school, but I can't do it because of Matt this morning. So thanks, Matt, for messing up my fatherly responsibility.
Hey, so your wife blames me. That's all right. You got a good excuse.
Hey, everybody, good morning. I'm Dickey Simpkins, like Matt said, from Washington, D.C. area, played at Providence College, played in the NBA with the Bulls, and I work with the Wizards. I do TV for Fox Sports, TV analyst, and I do corporate speaking. Yeah, my daughter graduated from Harvard last year, and I have 4 kids. One's still in college, and 2 that are one in high school and one in middle school. But hey, I wasn't on any of the other Rebound webcasts, so I may repeat some of the things that I already said, and may repeat some of the stuff that was just said. But what I've learned from the pandemic, learned from the last couple of years, and also taking it moving forward, things that I already knew, but the pandemic made you reevaluate how motivated that you and how aggressive that you apply the things that you know. A lot of times we know all these things, but we get to a point where we don't apply them at a high level all the time. And just to simplify, forecasting is a big thing. Being able to forecast down the road on things with your own brand, your own family, your own career, forecasting how the market, how the space will change, how would it be affected. Being able to forecast better is something that I learned, and being more diligent in, planning out and forecasting different things. The other thing is, which we all know, is I learned to build my brand more effectively virtually. I think if you don't have your brand or your business built for a virtual model at a high level, that is going to be an issue. And when you build that virtual brand, building a avenue of increasing your engagement. And like Matt mentioned, there's different, obviously we all know all the different social media platforms and YouTubes and things of that nature that we may have been resistant and reluctant to be involved with before, but now we have to. And then just creating multiple revenue streams is something else that I already knew, but it's even more important now with the pandemic, whether we go back in office, whether we don't, just building more revenue streams. So those are the things that I learned, and those are things that I'm being more motivated and pushing for the future in preparation that if the pandemic ever happens again or any other thing disrupts our daily lives, work, and family, that I am prepared. So that is my 2 cents, Matt.
Well, listen, that's one thing that comes to mind. And when Brian was talking earlier, that's why I think it's important to have this community, to get a sense, what are other people seeing? We have people on this webcast from different parts of the country. So what are you seeing in Austin, Texas? What are you seeing in New York? What are you seeing in Atlanta? What are you seeing in Florida? What are you seeing in Tennessee? And so we can then throw some spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks and who has a good idea that we can utilize in another part of the country. To share, a friend of mine, NBA coach, another NBA coach, Gordon Chazia, says sharing is caring. And I just love to have this community. If we come away with one thing that makes us better today, then this call was worth it. So thank you, Dickey, for sharing. I appreciate it. Anybody else? Okay, Jim, welcome, Jim. Jim, speaking of Texas, Jim Johnson, introduce yourself. First time
First time on.
rebounder, I should say.
I actually wasn't much of a rebounder. I was more of a shooter. In there with you big guys, that was always a tough place for me to be. But first, I want to thank Chuck Garcia for inviting me, and Matt, you for having me. It's an honor to be here. Actually, I emailed you. I said I've been watching you since the college days, like back with Jordan and those guys, and it's cool to just be hanging out here with. It looks like quite a few people that are have it nailed down. And we're trying to nail it down a little bit more.
Well, one thing I want to interrupt, no one has it nailed down.
Yeah, I was going to say,
No, really, I think that's one thing you got to realize. And I talk about, people wear masks. I wear 3 masks and they get heavy. So I'm getting a little hunched over. The first mask is I want to be perceived as being smart. The other one is I want to be perceived as being tough. You know, I'm from Long Island, you got to be tough. And then third is I want to be perceived as I have my shit together. And I'm not as smart as I like to think I am. I'm not as tough as I'd like to think it as I am. And I don't have my shit together like I think I do, like I want to do. And I think once you take those masks off and we can be vulnerable with each other, Brian Moran says vulnerability is the new invincibility. We can really grow. It's a great baseline to start from. So none of us have it figured out here, Jim. Otherwise, we wouldn't be on the call. So
yeah, I think we have a little bit figured out. We're always improving. And you're right. Like this idea that we've got the world by the short hairs is not always the case. And I have to admit, one of the reasons I'm here is because of that. Like I need to surround myself with other people that are going through similar situations, whether you have some type of coaching business or you're a speaker, whatever it is that you do out there. This whole pandemic thing scared the crap out of all of us, I would imagine. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, one of the things that really helped us through it was being observant prior to the pandemic of how people were interacting. People were not interacting in face-to-face situations quite as much. They weren't walking into Walmart anymore. They were going to Amazon. They weren't going to car dealerships anymore. They were hopping on Carvana. They weren't doing those type of things. And we noticed that and said, hey, I like that better. I like this idea of Amazon dropping stuff off at my house instead of me having to go in and hang out with the people of Walmart. And so through that observance, we're like, we need to be more digital. We need to make this more palatable, more something that people want to hop online and do, which allowed us, whenever the whole pandemic came along, to pivot quicker. We still weren't ready. None of us were. I think that we do a thing every single year. We're doing it, as a matter of fact, starting tomorrow is our strategy conference. We bring a bunch of business people in. We help them build their mission for the coming year. And none of us brought that up as one of the threats to our business, that there was going to be a pandemic that shut everything down.
Well,
I was
tell us, Jim, basically, you may have said it, and maybe I missed it. In 10 seconds, what do you do and who do you work with?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not do that. My name is Jim Johnson. I am the head coach here at Contractor Coach Pro. We coach home service contractors. Think your blue collar guys, roofers, siders, concrete guys, all over the world with their businesses, because most of them are good at doing what they do or selling it, but many of them are good at running a business. So we help them put all of those processes in place so that they can get control of their business, grow their business, and achieve personal and financial freedom.
There you go. Good. They professionalize the profession.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. My son's in that space with a home builder in Charlotte, Meritage Homes. Well, thank you for sharing. Before we go forward, I want David Van Daff to be thinking about something you talked about this summer about how to create culture in the remote workplace. You had some great ideas, and I know Danny Dolan asked about that after our last meeting. So I want to tee you up, David, with some of those ideas you had regarding creating a culture in the remote workforce. Chuck, go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for the opportunity here, Coach. It's great to be with everyone this morning. I think a couple things as I look back over.
Chuck, I'm going to interrupt. Tell everybody just briefly, name your company, what you do.
Okay. So I'm Chuck Cooper. My company is Whitewater Consulting. We work with small and mid-sized companies throughout the U.S., helping them really in the areas of human resources. And so this last year for me has been really a fascinating year in the fact that there's been so much that has changed in our world as it relates to being an employer, as it relates to how we communicate and how we manage our people, and recognizing that our people within a company is our greatest asset. I think a couple of things I really took away from this past year is really looking at the importance of really bringing the human aspect back to leadership. In many cases, we've seen where there's been such a wide distance between where the owners and the executives sit versus where the frontline workers are. And so being able to kind of like Matt, is almost what you were just speaking to a minute ago with having those masks. Recognizing that as leaders and as owners, we don't have the answer to every situation, and being willing to really be transparent and to let our teams know that, and really focusing really looking at the importance of building a community within our company as we move forward. And I think that that's really what we're seeing as we look at the whether you're calling it the Great Resignation or the Great Reshuffle. People are looking for ways to be able to connect with leadership and within companies in the mission of the organization. And I think that those are the type of things that we really have got to be focused on as we look to 2022. I think the other key piece here is recognizing that we all have to have a strategy on how we want to be able to attract and to be able to retain our high-performing employees. Because if we don't have a strategy for that, we're going to find ourselves without them as we move forward. So I think those are just some of the key takeaways from the year and things that we're really focused on as we speak with clients across the country.
Chuck, do you have a strategy that is published on your website where people can go and tap into that? Or do you have a blog or anything like that that we can tap into?
So on my website, I do have, we do a monthly blog, and we speak a lot to the company culture and particularly to remote workers, and then also to the strategies for talent acquisition. So my website is whitewaterconsulting.net. So I invite all of you to feel free to check that out and go to the blog section. That's something we were really passionate about, is helping our clients in that area.
If you can put your website in the chat, that would be great. I want to call on David Coble next. I met David a couple of weeks ago, and David works at Bank of America and is heavily involved in the politics for the state of North Carolina. And we got going on culture in the remote workplace, and David works at Bank of America. I'm really excited, David, that you're on the call. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
No, absolutely, Coach. Thank you for having me on here. And it's amazing when you talk about how quickly things change. I loved you at Notre Dame. I couldn't stand you at Carolina, and now I like you again. So it's amazing the cycle that we go through here. You
sound like my wife. You sound like my wife. Yeah.
But like you said, I actually spent about 15 years at Bank of America. I'm with Wells Fargo now.
Gosh, that's like someone saying you went to Duke. I apologize.
No worries whatsoever. No worries whatsoever. But the thing about it is, when we talk about the remote workplace and things like that, you and I had a really great conversation. But one of the things that, that we discussed was I'm not new to remote work. I've been in telecommuting since 2009. I started it with Bank of America. They had something called the My Work program. I was doing a lot of traveling for the M&A work that I did. So there was no need for me to be in an office inside of Charlotte because nobody I worked with was there. So they had an option for telecommuting. And then when I went to Wells Fargo, I was hired as a telecommuter. So when we got into the pandemic, my life really didn't have to adjust a whole lot from a work standpoint because I was already telecommuting. What I learned though, and what I found is that as a team leader, I've led teams from 50 people to 5 people, and the dynamics always vary. But this was the first time I was leading a fully virtual 100% telecommute team during the pandemic. And what I found was a number of the people on my team did not know how to really function in that world. They had been in offices their entire time, and they really were having struggles with with, making sure that, they were getting their work done and how to focus and things like that. And one of the things that I always made sure that I did was, because a lot of them were nervous about if they walked away from their desk, would I see them offline or would I see them away on instant messenger when I pinged? And one of the things that I found when we're talking about developing a culture in the remote workplace is every last bit of it, you have to start with trust. You have to look at your people and let them know that you do trust them. It's no different than I imagine. I've coached Pee Wee baseball. I've not coached obviously at the levels of a number of folks here, but I'd wager that most of you all want to build trust among your teams because that's what builds success. And so what I tell my folks is when they come, and join my team, what I say is, look, you're a professional. You've been doing this for a long time. I trust you to do your job, but rest assured, if you don't do it, I will find out. And I think that's one of the things that, you had asked me, when we talked about this, Coach, was how do you make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing? Well, the mechanisms we have set up between, business partner relationships, virtual meetings, feedback loops, and things like that, those things have been established to ensure that work is getting done and doing it well. And I'm very much ingrained into what my team does. It's funny, a lot of times I will be on one-on-ones with my team. I have them bi-weekly, every other week. I found that weekly, unless they prefer that, generally is a little much. But generally bi-weekly. And one of the things that comments I consistently hear is I will ask them questions and they're like, wow, I didn't realize you were paying that close attention. And so one of the things about it is, as an onus, as a manager and, responsible for coaching my team and building my team, I make sure I know what they're doing in their day to day. I want to get in there and challenge them and, credibly challenge anything going on. But at the end of the day, I need to be there to support them and to help them through. I tell them I'm here to clear barriers for you. I'm not here to do your job for you. I'm here to clear barriers so that you can do it. And I will trust you to do your job until I have a reason not to. And so that's one of the things that I think has been critical inside of this virtual work environment the last, 2020 and 2021, is making sure that our teams know that we trust them and that we are looking for them to do their jobs. And when we recognize that it's not, that we're willing to come in and help coach and really, get them back to where they need to be. So that's one of the things that I've really taken from this whole, sort of remote world we've been living in for the last little bit.
Thank you, David. I appreciate that very much. One thing that I think is important when I talk to people who have people working remotely is, those of you that may know the Traction, the book Traction, the Entrepreneur's Operating System, where everyone has a number. So if you hit your number, I don't care when you do your job. But if you make your number, you could be on the golf course all day, you could work at night, I don't care. Now, the tough thing is creating the number, like what is that number? And I think that's where we as leaders and business owners have to get creative. Like what number drives success in that person's role? And how can you hold that person accountable? Is it not names, people in the funnel, a sales funnel? Is it, how many times products, move off the shelf? But finding that number, and so everyone has a number, I think makes management and leadership a little bit more efficient. Brian, you jumped in. I'm going to go to David and then Marissa also, because you're in the hiring space. I want your input too about building culture remotely, because that's something, again, Danny Dolan and I discussed after our last call, but go ahead, Brian.
I thought I'm taking a lot of notes here because I love hearing how other business people think. We have people here in small businesses, mid-sized companies, and large businesses. And what's interesting is that everybody, there are similarities to the way we approach each day, and then there are differences. And some of them are regional and some of them are based on the size of your company. But I would love to hear from some of the other people on how they're approaching, as we enter 2022. But Dickey brought up a great point, and it's something I do a lot of workshops with companies on using social media to achieve your goals. And he talked about, virtually building your brand. That is, Dickey, you're like 1 in 1,000, believe it or not, of people who think like that. that I say there are 5 reasons that you use social media in business, right? You do it to talk to your customers, talk to your prospects, spy on your competition, network, and then build your brand. And it's amazing how many people don't realize that all of us have a personal brand. There's our corporate brand. When David mentioned Wells Fargo, everybody has an opinion one way or another, positive or negative. They happen to be my bank. And so I love Wells Fargo. But, when you look at, when you look at somebody's picture, you immediately 2 or 3 or 4 words come to mind. And that's your vision of their brand. And that's something that as leaders, we all need to work on, as you go into 2022. So I would say to people on the call right now, write down 4 words to describe your personal brand. Are you honest? Are you a leader? Are you professional? Are you funny? And then write down the type of leader that you want to be every day. So I think it was, I can't remember who said it, but when you look into the mirror in the morning every day, maybe it was you, Matt, and you say, okay, what kind of business professional am I going to be today? And then you find out how other people view you. I do a great exercise that people send me, the list of 20 to 25 names of colleagues, family members, friends. And I would say, describe Matt in 4 words. And it's amazing in some cases how accurate it is. Like you get about, so if you get 20 people, each of them give you 4 words, that's 80 words. And you say, wow, so 25 of those 80 words were dead on, the exact same words I used to describe myself. So I must be doing something right. But then they use words, in some cases, they're synonyms to the words you used. And in some cases, they're totally different. And so you have to look at the words that those other people give to you and you say, look, that's my brand to the outside world. That's how people view me. And that is so critical that we know our personal brand as we engage day to day, because, that in-person meeting, that got taken off the table. And that's been almost 2 years now. So you have to virtually work on it. So how do you represent yourself on LinkedIn or on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram? And believe it or not, every single post either defines you or it redefines you. And it's amazing at how many cracks there are in your personal branding foundation as a result. So that was a great point that Dickey made.
That's good stuff, Brian. Thanks for sharing, and quit sucking up to Dickey. He doesn't have, he's not going to get you a Michael Jordan autograph sneakers or anything like that.
I don't want it, but he does. He announces some of the Marquette games, so I need him to be nice to our team as we start to build and grow.
Fair enough. Hey, just real quick. I mean, I put down 4 words for my brand. I want integrity, authenticity, positive, curious. Those came to mind, and I hope that I represent that in my walk. If there's a gap between what you think your brand is and what it is, you need to do a 360 and have an executive coach sit your butt down and tell you the truth, because we need truth tellers in our life. I wrote a book and came out in the spring and talk about the 6 no's, KNOWS, of leadership. And the one is know yourself. And the last one is know the truth. You got to mine for the truth, because if you don't manage the truth will manage you right out the door. And I've had that happen to me. David, I want you to talk about, and Marissa, if you don't mind, how some tools to creating a good culture in the remote workplace. What do you do, David, and then Marissa, to bring together that corporate culture that we miss in the office, and now it's remotely, and business owners and leaders, they like to control, and now there's no control. So how do you manage it and create that culture that makes people come alive? David, you go first, please.
Excellent. Just making sure. David Van Daff, right, Coach?
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. I'm
As I look
sorry.
around, I see a whole bunch of Davids on there.
Well, you're the only David in my life, David. You are the David. You are the David.
Well, I appreciate you sharing it. And just to give some background, I talked about this a couple of months back. I'm with the National Academy of Sports Medicine. I'd been with them previously, left to launch a startup, and then came back about a year and a half ago, coming back at the beginning of the pandemic, really. With that being said, I inherited a team of 16, all of which I think I'd met one person in person at that period of time. So we started a business understanding the fact that we were not going to meet in person for a considerable amount of time. I recognized very early on that I wanted to get to know each employee. So when we did meet a year later, whatever, I at least had some background. I knew, were they married? Did they have kids? What were their aspirations, likes, loves, whatever it may be. So decided what I was going to do as a cheat sheet was go through a questionnaire. Each employee at the end of our team call, we dedicate 15, 20 minutes. They'd go through a questionnaire. We did 10 questions, fairly basic, name and spouse and kids and favorite movies, music, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it took off and everybody really enjoyed it. And really, it was the rest of the team that was embracing it even more than myself that was utilizing it as a management tool. So we went through all 16. Before you know what, they were asking, hey, can we do a second questionnaire? So I went through and Googled, a variety of different questions, fun questions, different things to that degree. We've gone through 4 rounds and they want more and more and more. We've added some new people into the team. It's a great opportunity for the rest of the team to get to know them. And it's really been an interesting opportunity for folks to learn. Along the way, we've had things like we had one question on there. What do you cook best? What do you go to in your family? And so we've had a variety of people talk about family recipes, et cetera, et cetera. Before you know it, now I've got one of the team members that's actually putting together a cookbook of everybody's recipes as they're going through. And it's just been a great culture builder. At the end of a team call, and some of those team calls are relatively challenging where we're talking about goals and obtaining goals, et cetera, but they know, hey, we shut down business last 15 minutes, turn over the floor to one of our employees that will go through a fun questionnaire and a variety of different things that come about. And then we've done a host of other things. We do a Friday night happy hour at the end of a business day where it's somewhat voluntary. People get on, chit chat for 30 minutes, talk about the weekend, talk about the week, whatever it may be. And it's just really taken off. Variety of different contests, sports contests, different things to that degree. I will share one other thing too, because it's current. I got an email on this just right before this call. I set up an NFL contest at the beginning of the year. So 16, we have 32 teams. I took preseason rankings. I took the best team in the NFC, paired it with the worst team in the AFC. We created these bundles together. Did a random drawing. Every person on my team got an AFC team and an NFC team. They get a point per wins. Decided, let's test this out. We did something somewhat similar in the NCAA tournament. And every week now, like the Patriots won last night, the guy who has the Patriots, he also has the Cowboys. He kind of got the luck of the draw in terms of preseason rankings. He's emailing out the whole team this morning in terms of taking over the lead and all this other stuff. And so a lot of just camaraderie, like simple, easy stuff. We're going to have a variety of prizes tied into it, but just give some personality to the team and something beyond just sitting in front of a computer and doing remote work all day.
Yeah, David, that's terrific. My guess is a challenge is when you have these meetings, when are your weekly meetings?
Mondays.
At what time?
10 o'clock Central. I've got people on every time zone. So 8 o'clock Pacific.
I think it's important to have a cadence, where people know Monday at 10. Now, the challenge I would imagine is you might not be in the mood. There might be a big agenda. Tell me about the challenge of turning off flipping that switch and going to the social part of that meeting. Have you ever skipped that part of the meeting?
We haven't, thankfully, and I think it's super important. We've had some meetings that I've had to condense everything in and make sure that we have that time dedicated to it. I also, we treat it as somewhat of around the horn where everybody, you bring up items that everybody needs to hear. So leading into that last 15 minutes, I'll take 10 minutes before that and we'll go around the horn, which I think helps with that transition. So I'm disciplined to know, hey, I got to cut it off here, open it up to the team, and then dedicate those last 15 minutes.
Because I think one thing, and this goes back to my college coach, he would say, start how you finish, meaning you got to be consistent. If you start something like that, it's the flavor of the month and it sounds good and everyone's excited. And after week number 4, you say, hey, we don't have time, we'll do it next week. That could really be a demotivator for people. And that's where getting to know yourself, like that doesn't motivate me as much it would somebody else. Again, I go back to the DISC assessment and Ray Tomaso jumped off. So Ray's anti-assessment, but I think the D's on a DISC assessment don't really care for that. There you go, Robert. The S's and the I's and but that's important. And start how you finish.
Well, one other thing I was going to say though, you're reminding me is it's a practice plan, right? In the same way, going back on the Coach Smith Carolina plan that's been passed along, and a lot of people with obviously coaching backgrounds here, but you have a practice plan, and when this drill ends at this point, it's got to end, and you've got to move into the next, and you've got to keep yourself disciplined regardless of any of the outliers.
There you go. David Van Daff was worked with us on the staff when he was a student at the University of Kansas. So that's how our relationship started, and it's really cool to see you on the webcast. Marissa, if you can introduce yourself and tell people who you're working with and your background a little bit.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm Marissa Canfield. I'm from Higher Better in Austin, Texas, and we are an executive placement and recruitment service. I met Matt just a couple months ago at Vistage in Las Vegas, Nevada. We had a great time, and I'm excited to be here. I would love to talk a little bit about what we're doing on engagement here and what that means for us. We kind of feel that culture and engagement are two separate things. Culture is really how we bring people on, how we hire, how we fire, and how we promote from within. And engagement would be more of the definition of everyone getting to know each other, learning a little bit more about each other in the remote environment, and then how do we do that? So just on the engagement piece, we actually have monthly meetings. So we'll dedicate an hour each month. It's the first Thursday each month, and we'll pick a topic, whatever is trending that month. A couple months ago, it was Halloween, and we just talked about what our favorite candy was. We played some games about scary movies, things like that, just to get people talking, because we don't know each other. We're all across the country, and something as simple as bonding over someone having the same Halloween costume in 1987 makes people laugh. And it's just really important to get to know who you're working with. Kind of like you said, Coach Matt, I'm in business development. So if I'm not networking, if I'm not talking to people, if I'm not helping a business, it doesn't really matter. So forcing people to kind of get to know each other, learn a little bit more about each other is really helpful in the long end. I met someone a couple weeks back who was a manager, and he would actually send Zoom meetings out to one person on each team, just drew names out of a hat. So you'd have an operations person talking to a salesperson, and you had to log onto the Zoom, and then there'd be a questionnaire to kind of walk through. So you talk to someone you'd normally never speak to and get to know them a little bit more. And he said that has had huge impact on their business. So that's just kind of something new that I've heard.
I like that. Tell me, give me I like labels. What would you call that? When you say, hey, we're going to do that, that
meet and greet.
Huh?
Just a meet and greet.
Meet and greet. So a random meet and greet with two people from different parts of the company.
Yes, that would never interact normally. I talk to sales all day long. I talk to leadership all day long, but I don't talk to my HR person.
Yeah. And you don't get to see them in the hall. Like if you're going to
you don't get to see them in the hall.
Lunch.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly.
Forces that engagement. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm not sure where everyone else is here in the country, but here in Austin, it's pretty liberal. So I've been at home for 2 years. And it's so impactful just to have lunch, just to, I don't know, just see people, walk in whenever you can. So if you have the opportunity to invite people into the office, don't live on that island, make sure that you're creating those relationships. So it might seem obvious, but just in case it's not, just FYI on that, as much as you can bring in person, that would be great.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you so much, Marissa. It's
course.
really neat that you're on the call. Danny Dolan, are you still on? Yeah, there you are, Danny. Tell me, you kind of prompted me to think more about the culture thing remotely. Is there any question you would have of Marissa or David or anybody else on the call? Yeah, you're muted, Danny. There you go. I can't hear you. Brian, can you hear Danny? No. Danny, we can't hear you for some reason.
Unmute your mic
No, he
at the bottom left.
yeah. It says it's unmuted. He doesn't show up as muted. So
He's probably got packet loss or bandwidth loss.
yeah. All right. Danny, if you want to type something into the chat, we'll pick it up there. Sorry about that. So anyway, that's good stuff, Marissa. I really, if we could pick one or two, again, nuggets, like I've just wrote down the meet and greet. I wrote down David Van Daff's idea of the 15-minute social. Do you have a label for that, David Van Daff? Do you have a name you call that at the end of your meeting?
We don't. We just go into the personnel questionnaire is typically what we call it, and just go by the person's name who's on the clock.
Gotcha.
The fun zone.
I used to do that at the end of practice when I got to SMU, my last coaching job, and I called it Irvin time. I had an assistant coach, Lance Irvin, and this is my D on the disc assessment. I had to delegate fun because I didn't want my players to get some kind of weird shift of, okay, he's intense, he's driven, we're doing these drills, and all of a sudden they're having fun camp-like drills. So I had to delegate the fun. I call it Irvin time, and it was the last 8 minutes of practice, I think it was. I didn't want them having too much fun, David. But that's knowing your strengths, knowing your weaknesses, and you don't have to be everything to all people as a leader. To delegate that responsibility can really allow someone else to empower them to shine. And so, but I wrote down the meet and greet from Marissa. I wrote David's personal zone time. And I wrote down the 4 words for your brand. Brian, you talk about that, and it reminds me when I was coaching, and I would tell players, I was coaching at FAU in Florida, and as a white male coaching Black young men, it was hard to talk about branding, and I didn't want to come across in any wrong way about, hair, where they wore their clothes, back then sagging, and their hairstyles were different. And I remember Michael Vick got arrested for the dog incident and was going to the courthouse, and he wore a suit and he had cut his hair. And I asked some of my players, I said, what did you notice? And he said, well, he didn't have his group of friends with him. I said, yeah, that's one thing. I said, you got to know who your friends are too. He cut his hair. Someone said, yeah, he cut his hair and he's wearing a suit. I said, why do you think he did that? Well, they said he wanted to make a good impression. I said, well, don't you want to make a good impression every day? And so how you dress, how you address people your eye contact, your brand online, Dickey, is important because people prejudge whether you like it or not. I mean, whether it's ethical or unethical. I mean, it's part of our defense mechanisms. You know, you quickly judge, like, why do you like something from Ralph Lauren? My daughter works there now. Well, that's a cool brand. Why do you like that car? It's a cool car. Why don't you like that shoe? Well, it's in a bad box. You know, Apple comes in, they put all this emphasis into the packaging. Well, it matters. So how we come across matters. And I think that leads to something else, is demeanor. I think of what's one of the most important attributes a leader can have. It's a consistent professional demeanor. And I didn't have that for a long time. And I look at when things aren't going well, what's the demeanor? Are they rushed or are they under control? Do they bite or do they sit back and are calm? People like the calmness of a leader under duress, as long as they're thoughtful and proactive and have a plan. And that goes back to the what if that Dickey talked about earlier. Brian, go ahead. We've got 6 minutes left.
Yeah, I'll be quick. You bring up a great point, Matt, and that is, the thing with Michael Vick, dress to impress, and what you're talking about, again, it goes back to branding. And the thing that people have to realize is that you can change your brand. Those 4 words that you chose to describe yourself, the beauty is those are foundational words, right? That you put into your whole persona. And you can, at any point in time, you can swap out one word for another word. I used to be credibility, character, integrity, vision. And about 6 years ago, I swapped out vision for faith. And then last year, I completely changed. Matt, we do that Sunday conversation. I completely changed my 4 words as a result of those conversations that we had, because I see life in a totally different way now. So you're not married to the word, even though they're part of your foundation. You're not married to those words for all eternity. You can always change because we're all works in progress, right? And we're all we learn every day, we grow every day. So, but that's a great exercise, like an end of the year exercise. What type of leader do I want to be in 2022? Mm-hmm. What type of culture do I want to have in my company? And you can control the conversation, the dialogue, the direction that you go in, but it requires work.
Yep.
You got to say,
self-awareness.
Yes.
Self-awareness, and that's where you need the truth teller. Who's your partner in crime? Yep. So that when you step out and you hit the they're the guardrail. They're like, they can come in and say, hey, Brian, you said you wanted to be one of integrity, being authentic, positive, and curious. You were negative as hell in that meeting.
Yeah.
Who's that person?
Yeah. That's
Robert,
a great
you got
point.
your hand up, Robert.
Yeah, that also strikes too. You could change those words, but you better be talking the talk and walking the walk while you change those words. And that also ties into your goals that you set every year. I set new goals every single year on self-improvement, on where my sales want to be. And you better be doing the things to improve your life and get you to where you want to be. Just writing them down is a start, because when you write them down and you think about them all the time, you try to become that. And as you become that, you're always focused on doing the right thing and being that. So it's very important to have visualization and write down and actually have short-term tangible goals and long-term tangible goals. Well, I'm telling you guys this, but most of you guys already know all that.
But yet old habits die. They do die. I wrote down my goals for 2022 last night, matter of fact, Robert, and I'm sharing them with an accountability partner at Vistage, which is the group I work with in executive coaching, because I want to make sure they're attainable, but yet they're stretch goals. And so You want to have a mix. You want to accomplish some goals.
Right.
Then some
And I also-
stretch goals. So
I also go back to basics. This is one of the first business books I read, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and
Yeah.
Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. And I've also taken, sales classes. So I always, going back to where you started, sometimes back to basics is the best way to stay on the straight and narrow, or stay on your path. And
it's all about fundamentals. I'm going to wrap this up. Robert, thanks for jumping in. Who likes the 8 o'clock? Who would prefer, let me ask this way. Would you all prefer the 8 o'clock time slot or a 9 a.m. Eastern time slot?
7.
Who said 7? Robert.
Sorry. I'm up at 5 every day.
Okay.
I'll second it at 7.
Huh?
I'll second it at 7.
7.
But there's some people in Texas, though, that means 6 o'clock. And
Yeah. Now I want to be inclusive. So I think right now we'll stick with the 8 o'clock Eastern time. If somebody has another recommendation, please share it. It is 1 minute to 9. I think what I'd like to do, the next call is January 4th. I might move that date, so stay tuned. But let's do a homework assignment. What are your 4 words that represent your brand? And be ready to talk about goals for 2022. Thank you very much for being on the calls. It's a great opportunity to learn and grow.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks,
Hey,
guys.
Jim Palmer was
Thank you, Matt.